We're back for season 6 of my podcast. I'm all about putting the human factor back into business by helping organisations become places where people are happy, well, and able to perform at their best. And that's what my guests shed light on with their expertise and experience. As those who know me will be very familiar with, my mantra is simple: get people right, get business right. And that means we'll be covering a whole range of topics that impact on employee experience, engagement and mental well-being. And many of you will know that I hate tick boxes. So we'll be kicking those out, getting beneath the surface of shiny new initiatives, stripping back layers of complexity and going back to the fundamentals of good business. That's the people. This series runs alongside the launch of Leadership Labs and Manager Labs that I'm excited to be facilitating with the fabulous Gemma Ellison of Heart Leadership. These are interactive and dynamic communities that turn typical L&D on its head. If you are a manager or leader and want an opportunity to problem solve, challenge the status quo, experiment and evaluate, all within a small supportive group, get in touch. More information and contact details are in the podcast notes. I'm your host, Lisa, psychologist, psychotherapist and founder of It's Time for Change. Thank you for joining me on Beyond the Water Cooler. I'm sitting opposite the very fabulous and smiley Courtney Hobbs, who's creative director of Collective Digital. Hi, Courtney.
Hi, Lisa. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Now, I'm pleased that you're smiling at me because you just joined the call saying, oh, I'm about to be interrogated by a psychologist. And this is not what this is about. And I'm trying to reassure you that this is just a nice chat and a nice conversation.
You've got obviously lovely face and nice demeanor, but the title is your title that you hold is scary, isn't it? Do you not find that people find that that's scary?
Yeah, but I tend to, when people actually get to, actually I was having a conversation with someone last week. When people get to know me, they just forget the title. And you know how some people lead with their title and lead their, their credentials and all their models of practice and stuff. And I describe myself as doing a bit of this and a bit of that, and I've got a mishmash approach, and I'm very grounded, and people go, oh, for you, I can just be myself. And this is what this conversation is all about. I met you, Courtney, on Mac Live for Macmillan Cancer, quite a while ago. I can't remember when that was.
Was it February?
It could be. And I just remember we were all telling our stories of how we've got from where we were to where we are now, because we've all got slightly untraditional paths to where we've got to. But I was really inspired by your story, and I talk a lot about things such as change and resilience and self-development and confidence and all those sorts of things. But actually, you are a brilliant storyteller in terms of talking as it is and saying this is my experience and this the learning for other people. So I was really keen to get you onto this show to share some of what you've learnt and what you can help other people do.
Oh, you're too kind. I feel like you're bigging me up a lot here. I'm concerned that I might not come through, but I think that I think if you can, I'm a big believer in it. If you can actually really listen to somebody and where they've come from, you can learn a lot. Like, we go through life more often than not just hearing what people are saying, but we're just waiting to respond rather than actually soaking in what they're saying and their experiences and what they've learned. And I think that's the biggest key to leapfrog anything. Just learn from other people, and then you'll be able to fast track a bit. So I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of chatting. I'm a big fan of talking to people and seeing where they've come from and how their experience and culture is very different to mine. And I think trying to approach everything with an open mind, I think is an important thing.
Yeah, I really like that. So let's start off then. Well, before we hear your story, tell us a little bit more about your role in the company you're in now. So what is it you actually spend your time doing?
So we're a production company, and during the pandemic we realized that everyone was going online, so we were kind of like, what do we do now? Because obviously nobody could work, and the businesses that survived all went online. And I think one of the, if only maybe one of the good things that came out of the pandemic as far as businesses are concerned is it really sort of it really pushed the narrative to businesses that were reluctant prior to the pandemic about social media, about online content, about, putting their message out there, putting their products out there. It really pushed them towards sort of having to accept that, oh yeah, this is a really important part of our business now. Because I think before then, people really viewed it as a luxury. And I guess like these sorts of services that we provide are a luxury in some cases, but for businesses that we work with, they have marketing budgets in place and stuff. And we really believe socials, video, images, storytelling in and of itself is probably one of the best, if not the best way to sell anything. And so we looked at people's socials to begin with, and we said, how do we help local businesses sort of master their social content more? So we set up this whole thing, and the whole idea was like creating big production based videos, animations, imagery, whatever it was, but for smaller businesses. So we did that, and we found a ton of success with it. And then 3 years on, we're still here. So now we're working on even bigger sort of productions, and we've kind of come full circle. But that's for us, that's how it happened. And we just sort of saw the opportunity and went, oh, there might be a gap in the market here where people are having to get online. They know that they want to do social media. They know that they need videos and images, but they're not very good at it, which is totally cool. And that's where we kind of found most of our success. Yeah.
And there is a real art to that creativity, because everyone talks about social media and being able to tell a story, but when you do it really well and you have that creative flair for something, which you obviously do, it makes such a difference. I haven't really embraced that side of creativity as much as I could with my business. The most creative I got was years and years ago when my coach, the company he was working with, came and they said, we'll help you create a video to kind of talk to people about what do you do.
Yeah.
Which actually has since evolved massively. But they're like, yeah, we're going to turn everything inside out, because going back to your point about people have perceptions, they hear a title and they think they understand what you do. Yeah. And I said, I want to turn that inside out and kind of start from a different approach. So we got my sofa outside on the lawn. We put my little lamps and coffee tables all over the lawn. We're going to put the inside out, and we're going to have a very different approach. And I was thinking, really, is this going to work? This is and actually it was amazing, because you are just, communicating something in a really powerful way. So there's a real power in that. And it really, for you, it's brilliant in terms of bringing out your storytelling side.
Yeah, for me, I spend most of my days pitching ideas to people like you, and things like, let's put your sofa outside, and then making out that it's a really great idea and getting everybody on board. I was like, we not so long ago, I think it was around February actually, we shot a brand film in a I don't even know what it's called. It's like, where you walk horses around in a circle to whatever that is called.
Whatever they're called, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and we put like a £70,000 Mercedes Benz in there, and wow. And the whole So I spend most of my days pitching ideas to companies, going, "You should do it like this," and everyone just looking at me like, "Have you lost your mind?" And but oftentimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I think that's the key, though, isn't it? Like, speak to people in a way that they understand, but then add the creativity around that. Like, what would stop people scrolling online, or what would catch people's attention? But then deliver the meat of whatever it is that you're trying to say in just keep it plain in English. And so yeah, I spend most of my days doing that, really trying to convince people to do crazy stuff and pay us for it.
Which you're obviously successful at. So tell me, what I'd really like to do now is to go back to hear a bit about your story, because I think that will speak for itself. I was saying to you before we pressed record that often I think about particular questions I want to ask guests or things I want to deep dive into, but actually today I just want to hear your story and just see where it goes, because there were so many things that you said last time. I'm like, oh, I love that, and it kind of really resonated. So so tell me, like, what kind of makes you tell your story? What is it about your story that is that you share?
Danielle had before we did Mac Live, Danielle was like, "Oh yeah, just tell us." So I was like, "Do you want me to talk about this? Do you want me to talk about that?" And she was like, "Maybe not." It was like, just try and don't try and shock people too much. Keep it PG. So yeah, I had to keep a lot of stuff out only because my background and experiences. Sometimes I use humor to sort of get me through and rationalize out what happened. But actually now I've got into my 30s and I've had a daughter of my own. It's made me look at things and go, oh yeah, it's actually not really funny, that is it?
Mm.
Like this
It's that
life-threatening thing.
interesting, but that in itself, Courtney, is a really important message about how we use different strategies, humor, whatever, to mask actually what's going on. And sometimes we use it consciously, and sometimes it's just a pattern of behavior we engage with unconsciously because we've always done it as our kind of coping strategy. So I think, and actually, if we all were to think about that in terms of the people we engage with on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes we might feel a bit fed up with someone's reaction to something. And you're like, actually, that could just be because that's their way of coping.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and my older brothers, we're having so many conversations now about like this kind of thing because we've all kind of gotten into our 30s and gone, oh, I'm not sure about that actually. Whereas, in our 20s, we caused a lot of problems ourselves, don't get me wrong. But we would just laugh about it. Whereas now we've all got kids and we're looking and going, oh yeah, maybe like, even little things like when we were younger, my younger sister just refused to go to school. For a number of different reasons or whatever. Things like that. Now I look at that. At the time, like 6 years ago, even we'd have laughed and gone, "Oh yeah, she's just her own person." She's doing really well. She's really successful actually. But we've always laughed about it. But actually now I've got a daughter myself and go, actually, it's not really funny. Like if my daughter come down the stairs just when I'm not going to school, I'll be like, you are. And I think like looking at it through the lens of being a parent now, even like it sounds really simple and small, but like even swearing in the home is a major, obviously a major deal. Like you can't do that, but but this is all stuff.
You view life through your own lens, don't you? It's like you have a particular lens, and then suddenly something happens. You meet someone who introduce some different ideas, or you have children of your own, or to be part of a different organization, and people start to gently challenge you, or you just see things differently, and it's like, wow.
And you need, because you think that I was thinking you think that your way of thinking and your way of living is just dead normal. Like I would like it wasn't until I got married, my wife was raised, her dad, he's retired now, but he was a vicar. So she was raised, went to like boarding school, went to Christian schools and all that kind of stuff, and loved it. It was great. But when we got married, I was like, oh, that's, what? And she was like, you can't do that. You can't say that. But in my house, it was so far different. It was just so different. It was like, well, I'll just do and say whatever I want. And and that doesn't usually work out quite well, to be honest. So I've had to go on this whole thing of, not only trying to see it from somebody else's perspective, but see it through a different lens of going, maybe it's not about right or wrong or good or bad. Maybe it's just about trying to be better yourself. And you can only understand that through someone else's perspective on yourself. You know what I mean? But that's a kaleidoscope in and of itself, isn't it? Where you're trying to like, tell me how I'm wrong. Tell me. Help me be better by ridiculing me.
That's about you being open.
And even that, like my older brother is so closed off. He's a great guy, but he really struggles to talk about where he is and what he's feeling and stuff. But even lately, he's been going through it, and he's kind of like saying things for the first time. And I'm like, oh wow, like that happened 20 years ago, and he's still clearly thinking. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because you can't escape it. Like eventually, sooner rather than later, your perspective will change. Your inner thought life will mature, and you'll just start to challenge things, won't you? Because everything changes. But yeah, so I was brought up in a house that was very busy. So I was one of 5 kids, and now I'm one of 7. All fairly close in age, other than the last 2. And it was chaos, really. I think we grew up relatively poor, only because there was just so many of us, and my parents didn't have a lot of people around them. So my nana had a problem with drink, and my mum's mum was not really around, and her dad had like took his own life and all this kind of stuff. So we grew up just in a house that was just really difficult. And I think it wasn't until I've got my own house, I've been married for 8 years now, where I always used to think that's how everybody lived, but it wasn't. So, you know, even silly things like I used to think that budgeting money was really hard. And it wasn't that it was hard, it was just that we didn't have any. so,
Yeah.
so 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 when we
Yeah.
got married, I was like, oh, actually, this is fairly easy, isn't it? With two incomes, and we both got decent enough jobs, and my older brother actually said that recently to me, which I thought was interesting. He said this exact same thing. He said, I used to think that money was really difficult, but actually it wasn't. It was difficult. It's just that my mum and dad didn't have any, and so they did crazy things. And my dad was like linking out the electric, and everything was always just bonkers, and like there was always bailiffs at the door, and we would always like hide from bailiffs. And like a few times they took all our stuff out of our house, which is not funny, is it? But it is funny. But I remember like hiding underneath the table from these bailiffs, and they were like banging on the dining room, and my mum and dad would make it into a game. And that was the game, and this carried on through our whole childhood and stuff until until one point, like one of my brothers got a pin and poked my other brother with the pin, and then he like shrieked out, and then the bailiffs knew we were in the house, and we just thought it was the funniest thing ever. But obviously, it just
Yeah,
really isn't.
no.
I just couldn't imagine. You can't imagine it, can you? But it's only since you get further on into life and you go, that's just bonkers. So that was kind of like our upbringing. I mean, there was a lot of love. Like my mum was really good, my dad was really good. Um, you know, we never really realized that we didn't have a lot of stuff until we got older. And you start wanting things that, you know, teenage years, you need more stuff if there's five. And so when that started to happen, we just started to do crazy stuff. Like me and all my brothers, there's like a year between us all. So we had at one time I was in high school, I had a brother in every single year of the school.
Wow.
So we were just like naturally like a mini gang, you know. So it was just, yeah, and everybody knew everybody because everybody knew somebody in that year group, or everybody knew someone in that friendship group. And and yeah, it just got out of hand. I left home really young. Went to live, me and my older brother, we went to live on our own. My youngest brother, who was 12 or 13 at the time, went to live with my nan because my mum and dad actually ended up moving away to Australia. So that was really difficult. And even that, you know, only in the past couple of years, we've gone, oh yeah, that's nuts. Like, you know, that I was still a teenager. And so like all of that kind of stuff, the want of nice things and not really being able to go to my parents for it, the want to try and fit in and not always kind of fitting in because you didn't have what every other kid had. You know, my mum and dad leaving us to go to a different country. All of that kind of like forced us down routes that you just probably would never want to go down, or definitely not want your kids to go down. And so yeah, we just got involved with loads of different sorts of things, like loads of crime, loads of violence. And it just kind of got out of hand. My two brothers ended up going to prison for a while. Because one, like, something got really out of hand, and they basically yeah, it was bad and it was their fault. And so that's kind of like how out of control it got. And I know that we spoke, didn't we, about the Mac Live thing? And I'd said about, did I say about the did I say about the baseball bat thing?
No, I don't think
Did I-
so.
No. So what happened was I got attacked by these lads, and I had my face smashed in with a baseball bat. So, and that was like it was really quite bad. And I think at the time I'd sort of like kind of become, I'd kind of fell out with my dad, and we didn't have a great relationship. And we still kind of don't, which is the sadness of it all.
Mm.
But I kind of like, you know, when you're a kid and you look up to someone or you don't look up to someone, I always kind of set out to like not be like him. But it was that moment that when that happened, I realized that actually I've gone out and done and become that very thing that I didn't want to do and become. And so that was really wild. That was a big turning point, really, to be honest, when that happened. And I sort of went out my way to kind of change my life around, really turn my life around, approach things differently. And that was probably where it first started, where I kind of tried to reprogram my own thinking and reprogram my own brain. And I was lucky enough to hear things, and I can't even remember where I heard them, but I was lucky enough to hear things like, you know, you've got to be around people that you want to become like. So I would go out my way to like find, like, especially men as well. Like I'd find like lads who were my age who I looked up to, or lads that were older than me, who I think now, at the time I didn't realize, but became mentors to me. Like one guy in particular, he's in his 50s now, I think. And when I met him, you know, 20 years ago, he really, I really felt that he really taught me how to be a man yourself, which was important because when you're looking at, a father figure and you're like, I don't want to become that. That's great, but what is it that you're trying to become? So, and there was a couple of guys like that as well that really helped me understand, how to hold yourself, how to carry yourself, how to behave, how not to behave, what to say, what not to say, and so yeah, I had to go on this journey of like rethinking everything, really.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting there is you've highlighted a really good point about people can identify what they don't want to be, but they don't fill then that gap with what they do want to be. And
Yeah,
sometimes people don't know what they want to be because they don't know what
yeah,
another option is. Or they have a vague idea, but they can't really see how it applies to them. It just
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
people. And I think, that's such an important message, isn't it? Because you can be surrounded by people who you think, I don't like their temperament, I don't like their way of
yeah,
managing people, I don't like their way of doing whatever. But actually, unless you have a good role model, how do you shape what you want to become?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really important to know, like, oh, I like you said there, like it's really important to go. I'm not sure where I want to go, but I don't want to go there, or I'm not sure who I want to be, but I really don't want to be that type of parent. And I think that's really important. But I think a lot of the times, what I've seen, people negate the fact that everything grows. So
Mm.
like, regardless of whether you want it to or not, everything grows, like everything. So if you don't know what you want to be, you've got to make sure that the things that you're growing is the thing that you actually want to grow. You know
Mm.
what I mean? And so you got to look at that through like, is it botanist? Is it botany? Plants and stuff? What's the
Yeah,
word?
yeah,
Oh yeah, get in.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
PhD.
chemicals, all that stuff. Yeah.
Botanical. Yeah, yeah. So you've got to make sure, through that, we're talking about a lot about lenses. Through that lens, you've got to make sure that what you're watering is what you want it to be. So like we get our grass cut like all the time, and every time we get a cut, it grows like straight away. And it's insane. And and I was talking to this guy the other day, and we were talking about, because we're really cool, we were talking about pH levels in soil and stuff. And I was and I was kind of like, oh, that's really interesting, because that's kind of like the an environment that you're in, whether it's a
Mm.
workplace, a marriage, any sort of relationship, kids, whether you're the kid or you're the parent, you've got to make sure the pH of your soil is correct so that you can grow, not only grow the right thing, but grow it in the right way at the right rate. Because the inevitability of life is that everything grows. So if you're watering the wrong thing and the pH of the soil, i.e., the people you're knocking around with, the people that you look up to, the people that inspire you, are all the wrong people, you're going to grow into something that you hate. You're going to grow into something, and you're going to grow tall as well. That's the problem, isn't it? You're going to grow bigger and bigger and taller until you get cut down. And I think that's an important thing to think about, because everyone says things like, oh, I don't want to be like that, or whatever. But it's important to actually look backwards to that and say, I don't want to do that, but look forwards to go, okay, so what is it that I'm watering, and do I even have the right? Am I even in the right soil to grow? You know what I mean? I think that's important.
I love that. That's just brilliant hearing you describe it like that, the whole pH levels and being in the right soil. And
I'm a scientist.
yeah, you are.
I don't know anything about soil. Don't know anything
But
about science.
but you know what? That is such a good description. And I think people need to think about what they want to focus on, how they
Yeah,
want to grow. But also, I
yeah,
think there are a huge number of people in organizations who have grown into something without
mm,
any conscious plan, without any
yeah,
intention. They've just grown. And now all the stuff circulating around social media and
mm,
always key messages about this is what we need people to be a good
yeah,
team player, to be a great leader. This is what we need. And suddenly we're asking people to shine a lens or a light on themselves and go, actually, I'm not doing
yeah,
that right. And to be
yeah,
able to have the courage to say, I've become this person who's got this particular role, but actually I don't think I'm doing it in the way that
mm,
I believe is actually best now. And to be able to step out of that and
yeah.
relearn from potentially from scratch, or just to say these are things I'm not so great at, that takes a huge amount of confidence.
Self-awareness is really important, and I've always been lucky to be quite self-aware. I don't know why that is, um, but self-talk is really important as well. But it's very difficult to manage your self-talk if you're not very self-aware. So
Yes.
I've always been quite good at like looking at things and going, I'm not really. I'm not really good at that, or that's not who I am, but not in a way that makes an excuse. Sometimes, you've got to look at stuff and go, I'm not very good at that and I need to be better.
Mm.
But other times you've got to look at it and go, that's just, I'm not very good at it and I'm never going to be good at it. So we need to, we need to put a process in place, a person in place that fixes that problem. Because it's like what we were saying before. If you feed something that's just not your thing, it's
Mm.
going to grow, but it's not going to be great. You know what I mean? If you're feeding the beast of something that you're not very good at, there's just not much point. So I think that's a really important thing as well.
I think that, yeah, I couldn't agree more. That whole idea of self-awareness, which people talk a lot about self-awareness, but the ability to be able
Yeah,
to almost step outside. I call it your observing self. So to step outside and actually observe critically
yeah,
how you're behaving or what you're thinking, and being able to then listen to the commentary around that and think, actually, is that something I want? Or is that
yeah,
something I
yeah,
don't want? Am I going to change? Am I going to take control? Um,
yeah,
but and helping people understand that they have a choice rather than something's happening and they just got to go with it because that's my thought.
yeah, exactly. Like having that awareness of going, just stop for a minute and just ask yourself, like, is this even what? Because I see that all the time. I see that, and we work with loads of different businesses, and you see businesses and they promote from within, which is fantastic. But then you find someone who's in a really high level role and they don't even want to be there. They don't enjoy it. They don't like the job. They don't like the industry. And for me, I find that really hard to understand and get a hold of and not be friends with, but really come alongside. Because I just think if you're not doing something that you love and
Yeah.
your life has just took this autopilot kind of way, that's really tragic. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to get these hours back. Like, this is literally it. This is as good as it gets.
So your turning point was when you decided that you don't want to be this kind of person anymore. You want to do
Mm,
stuff, you want to become something different.
yeah.
How did you go about
Yeah.
that
I
then?
quite dramatically, like anybody that knows me, I can be quite erratic. And like once I've gone, right, this is what I'm doing, then that's what I'm doing. And again, I think that's been like a real driver for any success, no matter how small it's been, um, in my life, because I've always kind of gone, that's what I'm doing, and hell or high water, that's what I'm gonna do until the point where I've reached and gone, oh yes, this is physically impossible. And so I basically changed everything. I stopped I stopped hanging around with certain people like overnight. It caused a lot of problems, to be honest, as well. So it's probably not, I'm not recommending that anybody can't do this approach, but sometimes this approach is needed as well. I quit my job just overnight, just quit. I was like, I don't even like this job. I'm not doing it. And it's interesting because I took that job initially because of the circumstance that me and my brother found myself in. And I never wanted to do that job. Like I trained as an electrical engineer and I finished it and I become qualified and all this kind of stuff. And it's always been good because I've got a safety net in the background. But they got to a point where I was like, I absolutely hate this. I
Mm.
hated it before I started it. I hated it all the way through, and I hate it now. So I just quit overnight, and I went to I went to work at a Costa, and I didn't know like how to make coffees or anything. So I was like, yeah, let's just give this a go, because I realized that, like, all right, I might hate that, and I might hate this, but that won't get me to where I want to be, but this will. So I went to work in Costa, and I didn't have a car or anything like that. Me and my brother were living in this flat in this terrible area, and so I took this job, and I took it because I could do the early shift. So I knew that like I could get up, and I walked all the way, and it's a good few miles. So I'd get up at like 5, 4 or 5, and I'd walk all the way to this town, and I'd do the open at Costa in this town centre, because I knew if I did the open, I could finish at 3. So when I
Mm.
finished at 3, I then started to do what I wanted to do. And
Mm.
so, and so eventually, I just, every single time the timetable went up, every single time the shifts went up, I was like, give me the early shift, give me the early shift, and that's what I did. Yeah. And I met my now wife at the time, and she just thought I'd lost the plot. But I remember saying to her, we talk about this quite a lot. I remember saying to her, just if you give me 6 months, you'll see what I'm talking about. And in 6 months, I'd managed to put a little bit of money in the bank. But more importantly, I'd spent so many of my afternoons going to networking things, trying to build a business, and I built up a client list and everything like that within 6 months. But it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. So I did that because I thought I'd really just like to be a designer. So I was like, I'll just do that for a bit. So I just did that, and then I kind of just built this graphic design business. which ultimately failed. But the reason why it failed was my wife got hit by a car. Uh, we got married, and then 2 weeks later, she was hit by a drunk driver, and she broke her neck. She fractured all of her ribs. She had a bleed on her brain. She had 6 fractures in the base of her skull, and she broke the bottom of her spine. Oh, she had a crack in her hip as well. So I had to I built like this whole thing up. We'd done this whole. I was like, yes, I've made it, and then
Oh,
and then all of that come crashing down. So I couldn't keep up with the contracts. I had to, obviously, loads of clients were unhappy, and rightly so. And so I had to kind of fold that. So I kind of went back to square one because I had to take, I think it was like 6 months. I was off work for like 6 months where she was home, and she had like a neck brace when she came out of hospital. She had like a neck brace on and everything. It was horrendous. And so I had to like honestly do everything. I had to learn how to wash her hair. I had to put her. We just got married. I had to put her on and off the toilet. It was horrendous. It was
God.
horrendous.
But that, I mean, but just that alone, the resilience to get through that and not just give up on everything and not just, because to have built your business, like to achieve effectively your dream,
Yeah.
to work your socks off, that's like real perseverance to kind of keep on all the early shifts. So you can do all the other stuff in the afternoons. And to then got to do what you want to do with your business, with clients. And it's all like, yes, that yes moment for it all to be taken away. A lot of people would just potentially give up or just feel very sorry for themselves. And I don't get the impression you did that. Or did you wallow in that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you've got to, haven't you? I think like you've got to spend a bit of time wallowing just a little bit. You know what I mean? You've got to do that. Like we work with a guy called the sumo guy, Paul McGee, who's brilliant, and he talks about this idea of like hippo time, and he talks about like hippos like wallow in the mud and stuff, and he does this whole analogy, and it's brilliant, and that's something I've learned from him, where you've gone, yeah, like it's okay to wallow, but the problem is a lot of people stay there.
Yeah.
So like you can't stay there. And so for me, I've always looked at it and gone, well, life is a paradox in the way that it's very short, but also it's very, very long when you live in it. What's that saying? Is it like the weeks are short, but the days are long, or something? It's that, isn't it? So yeah, something like that. So you gotta like accept that and go, okay, you have to find it. It's not about you can't stay still and you can't go backwards. So you have to find a different way forward. That's always been my thing. Like just find a new dream. Like it's fine. Like just find a new dream, or find a new version of that dream, and then do it again. And but it's hard, isn't it? Because it's easier said than done, and you've got to be willing to willing to really dig a well when it's not raining. And I think that's what you've got to do.
And I think that wallowing bit is really important, because I think many people I see they hit an obstacle and they just kind of bounce onto the next thing, and then there's no sense of pausing and grieving in a way, that sense of loss, because you've worked your socks off on something, or something's really important to you. When you lose it, you've got to come to terms with that, accept that, think, actually, what do I need to learn from that? What do I want to take with me into my future, my new plan? What do I want to leave in the past? And if you don't pause and actually just sit with those feelings of life is really tough sometimes, and I want to just mope around and just feel sorry for myself a little bit. That's really important. But you've got to, as you say, you've got to get out of that, and you've got to do that again with intention, being very clear about, am I following the same dream? Am I still going to do my kind of graphic design stuff, or am I doing something completely different?
Yeah. And reinvention, the beauty of any crisis, I think, or anything that's ever gone wrong in my life, is the opportunity of reinvention is fantastic. Like just reinvent yourself. Like you could literally just do whatever you want. So like on the back of like something horrific, once you've spent that time, you then get to decide again, okay, like, do I want to do that? Do I want to do a different version of it? And I think that's a great thing that people overlook. The opportunity to start again is incredible. And I think people overlook that because they get stuck in that self-pity. And I think one of the best things I've always kind of learned, and I've kind of told myself through my own childhood, is two things. Life is fragile, and nobody owes you nothing. Like life doesn't owe you anything. So it's all on you. And that sounds really harsh, but there does come a point when you got to pick yourself back up and go, well, I'm still here, I'm still breathing, like everybody's relatively healthy. Now what? And I think people get so caught up in the crisis of what's happened and the fallout of it, which I don't want to minimize because people go through horrendous things, don't they? But yeah, you can't stay there. Someone said to me years ago, and I've never forgotten it. I can't even, this is really bad. I can't even remember who said it to me. And they basically just turned around to me and said, don't build a house where you should pitch a tent. And
Mm.
I've always thought about that when it comes, like when something goes wrong, don't build a house there. Like pitch a tent there. So like stay there temporarily with your own feelings and feel them and make sure that like, oh my gosh, I'm really, I'm really going to take a few days off, take a personal day, do whatever, but just don't build a house there. You know what I mean? Like don't put down roots there. Don't put foundations in. Don't build brick and mortar there. Because there's going to come a point when you got to move on. You mean you got to pack up the tent and move on, but it's much harder to pack up a house, isn't it?
Yeah, that's you're so good at your metaphors and your analogies and just kind of telling the story, because I think you're very good at bringing that to life. I think, one of the things I remember you saying before when I heard you talk on Mac Live was about I think you said something like I'm 33 or however old you said you were, and
Yeah.
I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. And it's that sense of no, nothing's permanent.
Yeah.
And actually, you're doing this thing right now, but what's around the corner, you don't know.
You don't know. Yeah, you don't know. I know we spoke a little bit before, didn't we, about my daughter and stuff, who I'm honestly obsessed with. Like I'm absolutely obsessed with her. But what I found is like I still feel like I'm 16 in my mind. Like when she breaks something or she draws on the floor, on the walls, it's me as well that's looking around for the adults, only to realize that like, oh yeah, hang on a minute, that's me. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Just there's nothing wrong with not knowing what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with not feeling like you're an adult. There's nothing wrong with, not knowing what path you want to take. But I think there's a big thing wrong when you don't push on doors and you just don't try because of that. That becomes so debilitating that you just don't try anything. You got to try something. I think, anyone that works with us, friends of mine who are going through different things, I always say, just try something. Just try something. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Because like you said before, nothing's permanent. I think people take life way too seriously, to be honest with you. Like everything grows, but like we were saying before, but everything changes as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you can have an open mindset and just have a bit of fun on the way and try different things, being curious and knowing that they might not work out, and that's the stuff I was talking about on Mac Live about.
Yeah,
I've done some really random things going, that sounds like a good idea, and you try and like, no, I'm rubbish at it, or it's just really dull, or it's just not meeting any needs, or whatever it is. And I remember I've been standing outside with two people called Helen Joy and Louise Puddifoot, and we stood outside a shop in a village with a load of Kit Kats, doing a little self-recording of us doing something about have a break and go and have a Kit Kat and think about some aspect of your business. All these random things. I mean, like, are we saying this? Who's saying this? And what are we saying? And afterwards, a couple of months down the line, like that whole venture, we park that. Let's move on to something different. But it was fun on the way. I learned a heap of stuff, which was actually what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and how to tailor things a bit more. And actually, it was that whole you try loads of different things to work out what it is that really motivates you, and what what your passions are and what your strengths are, and so on.
That's the thing. You just got to try stuff. Just try it. Like, just try it. Like, you know what I mean? You just got to. When we were in school, my brother sold stick insects. He sold stick insects and chewies, and he made a fortune. And I always think about that. I think you just got to try it.
Another thing you said in Mac Live was life.
Sorry, what?
Life
it just froze a little bit then. What did you say? Sorry,
life is not a dress rehearsal. And I love that quote.
Oh yeah.
Just really powerful.
I think my thing with anything is I always say this is my like sort of outlook on life in particular, other than I do think people take life way too seriously. And people might argue that sometimes I don't take it seriously enough, and okay, fair enough. But I just think, like we've said, everything grows, everything changes. You never know what's around the corner. I always say to people, the best thing, not the best, one of the best things that ever happened to me was what happened with my wife.
Mm.
And people are really shocked by that. But the reason that it was, once we've been through the horrific nature of it all, when you're on the other side of it, the power that comes from that in the perspective that you hold as a result of that thing changes everything. So it, like a life-threatening thing will put everything into perspective for you, everything into focus. Like everything that you thought was important, it just isn't important. And even with business, talking about business, person who owns a business, it's important, but ultimately 100 years from now, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to care. People are only going to care about, whether you were there for them and how you made them feel and stuff. And I think that's the most important thing. So you've got to focus on that. And this is it. Like you only get, I'm really passionate about this because you only get one go around. My granddad took his own life when I was 4 years old, I think, somewhere around there, really young. And it devastated my mum's family, who already weren't very close anyway, and has had this like crazy lasting ripple effect, as you can imagine, with these things, as these things do. And I always think about that, and I could never understand it because I know obviously to get to that point psychologically and mentally, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I'm definitely not speaking down into that situation or anything like that. But I do think about that a lot because I just think, I wonder what would have happened if he could have found the strength to just go, I'll just give it another day. Just give it another day. Just see what's around the corner tomorrow. You know what I mean? Just see what happens. Just chill. I think we've spoken a lot, didn't we, or at Mac as well, and on emails and stuff about. I honestly believe that the trick with anything in life is just two things: resilience and patience. If you've got the patience just to ride it out, just to stay holding on for a little bit longer, you'll build the resilience you need to then stay on holding on even longer. It's, you know what I mean? That's just what I think.
Yeah. I mean, I always say to people, whatever situation they're in, it will pass, because you've had the challenges you've had in your earlier life and as a child. It means that now you don't take things too seriously. You have fun. Yeah. And I know it'd be interesting to challenge people who say you don't take life seriously enough, because actually, why should we take life seriously? You care about your wife, you care about your daughter, you care about your job, and you're successful in that. So like when you've got the important things in life, you care about those and you're doing the best you can for that. Life should be about having fun.
Yeah. Like why would it not be? You know what I mean? Like, why would it not be? As long as, I think, which sounds really cliche. I said this even to my wife the other day. Are you being a good person? Yes. Are you trying the best? Are you doing the best you can? Yes. Then it doesn't matter. That's all you can do. It's not really. I'm sure there's more complicated. I'm sure there's more eloquent ways of saying that, and I'm sure there's more intelligent people than me who would maybe say that's wrong, or maybe say that in a more, I don't know, influential way. But for me, like, on the basis of everything, if you're just working hard, staying humble, and being kind, everything else will just work itself out. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, don't get caught up in the details. Don't get caught up in the minutiae of he said this and she said that and whatever. Just love your family, work hard, stay humble, and be kind. Like, that's it. You know what I mean? Like,
Courtney, we don't need any of those intellectual types. You've just nailed that.
Yeah, we don't need big words, do we? No. Humility is a big word for me. Humble that's the biggest word you're gonna get. Yeah. Although I did say botanist earlier, so I'm pretty proud of that. So,
so how do you deal with? Because you must have had things in your life that you've been not afraid of, but there's a sense of fear in terms of, I don't know, trying something new, or it's the unknown, or how do you?
Yeah.
Because I don't want people to listen to this thinking, oh, it's all very well, you just got to smile and have a positive attitude, and then, everything just swims on, and you're like, yay, thumbs up. It's like, it's not really like that.
My life's falling apart. Thanks for your help.
So how do you cope with things that, when you feel afraid of what's to come or what's happening in the moment?
I think I'm probably a little bit daft and don't really understand fear a lot of the time. So I'm late to the party when everyone's worried. I'm a bit like, oh, is this something we should be worried about? But I do think that one thing I've learned a lot is that fear is fake. I actually don't. I mean, I don't know what the psychological take on this is,
Don't
but
worry about
I
that.
just
I
think
hear your take.
I always think that, well, fear is in and of itself has to be fake and made up in your own mind, because fear isn't danger. Danger is danger. So danger is, my opinion, danger is obviously very dangerous. It's very you should be scared of something that's dangerous. If you're stood on the edge of a cliff, you should probably be worried, and you should probably take the necessary actions to get away from the edge. But fear in and of itself, the way that I understand it, is always you're scared about something that may or may not happen. So, you know, it's that principle of Schrodinger's cat. It's like, well, it might happen and it might not. But while it's in the middle of might happening and might not happening, you're worried as if it is going to happen. And then people make decisions based in that emotion, and they make decisions irrationally because they're fearful. But I actually just think it's just in here, and I think people jump the gun and they make decisions on stuff that hasn't happened yet. Like, when it happens, deal with it. Deal with the danger. Like,
Or
don't
if it
deal with the fear.
happens.
Like, don't deal with
Yeah. If,
exactly, exactly. Like a lot of the times, the stuff that you're worried about, the stuff that you're fearful of, it actually doesn't happen. And if it does happen, it always almost never happens in the way that you were so scared that it was going to happen. So I think for me, I've always kind of approached things like that. Fear in your mind is just totally made up. I don't know what the scientific basis is, but it's a reaction to something that hasn't happened yet but might happen, and there's just no point in entertaining it, really. It's okay to be worried, but don't change the course of your life because you're scared about what might or might not happen. Just do it anyway, and then deal with the consequence.
and I think if you're again, I think you've explained that brilliantly. If someone's feeling stressed about something, anxious about something, they're not in kind of the perfect state of mental well-being, then our brains are already primed for looking for threats that are going to make our feeling even worse. So if we're feeling stressed, you'll then be slightly more sensitive to additional stressors that are potentially coming on board, because it's going to add to that level of stress. And so that's about helping us push away any threats for self-preservation. So, and if you think about society now, everyone's running around pretty stressed and feeling pretty anxious about stuff, and this state of fear, the imposter syndrome, that voice in my head saying, I can't do this, or what about that? And suddenly we're all our emotional arousal is higher than it should be on a day-to-day basis. And then it means we're already then looking for that sense of threat. And your imagination always then kicks in, and it's always the worst case scenario. So, we have always innate resources, our ability to build rapport with people and our ability to problem solve and use our imagination and so on. The imagination is the most misused innate resource we have, because it's really great for helping us problem solve. Like, I've got a predicament, I don't know what to do, I'm going to use my imagination to think that one through. But actually, if I'm feeling stressed at the time and I'm trying to use my imagination, it's going to imagine the worst case scenario. So if I'm asking you, if you're having a really, really bad day, and I say, I want you to picture Courtney being stuck on a desert island, you might picture that, be going, oh my gosh, I'm dehydrated, I'm sunburnt, I've got no food, the sharks are circling, the rest of it. If someone said to me, and I'm in a great place and someone said, picture yourself on a desert island, stuck on a desert island, be like, yes, I'm in a hammock, I've got my cocktail, I've got my book, there's no one needing anything. But that's all about our use or misuse of imagination. And I think we have to be again, it comes back to self-awareness, clocking that, being aware of that, and thinking, is that the worst case scenario? What are all the other potential options? What is most likely? What's the evidence of what's happened before in terms of what's likely to happen next? Or if I'm worried about it veering off in a certain negative direction, what can I do to try and perhaps influence it to take a more positive direction? What can I control? What do I need to let go of that actually I just have no influence over at all? So I think it's really, really important. That comes back to self-awareness.
Yeah, I mean, that's dead interesting, because I know people, and it's almost like fantastical, isn't it? I don't know, is that the right word? Like, where people like fantasize things, so they always fantasize it in their head, like way different than it was, or way different than it will be. And I'm like, just slow your roll, like you just see what happens, And I think a lot of times with the imagination thing, which I think is fascinating. Like I don't know anything about this kind of stuff, but I'm always fascinated by people like you who do know about it. But because I think a lot of the times when people say, "Oh, well, what if this happens?" or "Why me?" is a thing, isn't it? Like people go, "Oh, why would that happen to me?" My thing has always been, "Well, why not?"
Yeah.
My thing's always like, "Why not you?" Like somebody's gonna have to be the next Beyonce. Someone's gonna have to be the next whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever your inspiration is, why not you? You know what I mean? If you can't sing in that in that illustration, that doesn't really work.
I'm
But you know
definitely
what I
the next
mean? Yeah.
Beyonce.
like they're just, you know what I mean? The playing field is level in the sense of like we're all people. Yes, people are more talented in different areas, of course they are. But why not you? Why can't you? Why can't you build a great family? Why can't you build a great business? Why can't you become that musician that you feel like you're gifted and talented to be? Like why not? When people, I think a lot of times they do it in reverse, don't they? Go, well, why me? And it's that like defeatist attitude that I get where it comes from, but it just drives me mad. It just drives me mad, to see people wasting their life and wasting their time in their own sort of fear of things, just coming full circle to be like, well, it doesn't matter, just try it and then see what happens. And if it doesn't work, like we said before, you might find something that you do like. You might, I know lads who have set out to be musicians and it didn't really work out. But they found that they really enjoyed the production side, and now they're like, they fly around the world being music producers. It's like you just don't know. And if they'd have stayed in the thing of going, oh well, I'm never going to be the next whoever, they'd never be where they are now. And I think social media's got a lot to answer for on that basis as well. I love social media, and I know a lot of people have issues with it. I've never really had much of an issue with it, but I can see and I understand why that fear and that debilitating attitude of, well, that could never happen to me, or why would that happen? Nothing good ever happens to me, is because they're constantly reminded of like this highlight reel of somebody else's life, and it's like it's just not real. Like it's just not real.
And it goes, when you're saying about it's almost the kind of fantasies, I think some people just think it's for someone else, or it's got to be perfect. I have a go at something and it doesn't work out straight away, or it doesn't feel perfect straight away, and I'm expecting it to be easy, or I'm expecting to perfect it really quickly. And you're like, actually, stuff doesn't have to be perfect. Real life is not perfect, and as long as you're enjoying it and enjoying the journey you're on and it's going the right direction, then enjoy the journey. And it's not about getting to an end point and feeling like I can tick the box, I've succeeded. It's like actually just do what interests you and what brings you joy, and does something positive, and then you keep evaluating as you go along, rather than striving for, this is what I want to do next, and actually if it's too hard I'm going to give up, or if I haven't perfected it straight away then I can give up.
I think it's like the happiness and joy as well, I think comes into that. Like we thrive on that happiness thing, and socials again, like, oh, everyone's happy all the time, everyone's going on holiday all the time. Well, they're not. That's just what you see. And it's that, like, I always think of like happiness as like an oscillating wave. So like it comes up and then sometimes you're not very happy and it's a bit rubbish, and other times you're absolutely over the moon. But I think happiness is not something that you should to try and set out to achieve or attain. You should try and attain some sort of level of joy. So like in electromagnetic waves, the waveform oscillates like this, but it always has a 0 point, which is like in the middle. And I always think about that. It's probably the only thing I ever took away from my electrical engineering thing. Joy is the 0 and the center point there. And then happiness comes up and down, up and down. There's days when I'm not happy, but because I've tried to find a level of joy and master that joy, I'm relatively more happy than I'm not, because I've got so much joy in what I'm doing. I look for points to be joyful about, what I've got, like gratefulness and gratitude, like joy in my family. I love my daughter and my wife, the house we've built, things like that. If you can find points of joy, it centers everything else, and then happiness oscillates around that. And if you have a rubbish day, well, it's okay. You know what I mean? You're going to go home and there's some joy there, or you're going to go to work and there's some joy there. But people ride that happiness wave like this. And one day they're made up, and the next minute it's almost like manic depressive, isn't it? And I feel like people then make choices based on that, and it's sad to see, because you shouldn't trust happiness. It's it's not. You shouldn't trust it. Trust joy. Don't trust happiness.
You have some good messages, Courtney. I would love to hear, because I'm just conscious. I've glanced at my clock and I'm thinking, wow, your energy is, you just exude all this passion.
Oh, you're too kind.
I'm talking for ages. tell me what would be your takeaways? What would be your kind of key messages that people who listen to this, and it could be anyone listening to this, what would your message be to them to take away from this so that they make the most of their experience? And this podcast is kind of focused around the workplace, but in terms of if we have the most meaningful experience for ourselves and in work, then we thrive. What would be your key messages?
I think really simply, which sounds really reckless, just build the plane while it's in the air. Like, don't try and have all of the answers. Don't try and have everything figured out, because most of the time that'll probably just prevent things and prolong things. Just get going and just see what happens. I'm a big believer, and I say this to people all of the time. Just start where you are and just use what you have, because everybody has some sort of resource. Like, it might not be directly the resource that you want or think that you need, but you can still leverage resource into getting those things. So when I started our business, I didn't have any money, and I needed to buy a camera, and I had a friend of mine who came from, a much more wealthy family than mine. So I just said to him, I said, "Hey, look, can you lend me some money to buy this camera?" That was it, because you got to just start where you are and just use what you have. So I just went to him, and I felt at the time, it's different in my thinking now, but at the time I felt so degraded. It wasn't even a lot of money, but I was so committed to go, that's where I'm going, and I'm going to do anything it takes to get there. And so I kind of, like I was saying before, just, you got to humble yourself sometimes. Go, is there any chance? And he was happy to, you'll find that most people want to help. They want to help, but they just never ask. So they don't want to intervene. So, I needed a camera, but I didn't have a camera. But I had a friend who could loan me some money, and I got a camera, and we made a deal, and I paid him back with some interest and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes we don't start because we think what we have isn't the right thing. But it doesn't matter whether it's the right thing or not. It's just a question of whether, are you going to use what's in your hand to get the right thing to start the journey. You know what I mean? But most people just want to have everything figured out. They want to know where they're going. They want this profit margin, and this is going to happen in year 3 and this quarter. Just start where you are. Just use what you have. It's really simple.
Brilliant advice. Brilliant. Because if you try and map it all out, it paralyzes you, because you don't take any action at all. Like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, or I can't figure that out, or it feels too complicated and overwhelming now. Just take one step on that path. The next step happens.
Yeah. Me and my business partner were going through a thing at the moment, because I found a note that he'd written on his iPad with a stylus, so it's all handwritten. And we were talking the other day about getting it printed out for the office, because it's the first ever meeting that we ever did. And it was like, here's the work that we have, and here's the people we know. Can we make X amount to sustain a wage? And it's so interesting, because the numbers on there, they're not big numbers. But at the time, they were massive to us. We were like, if we achieve this, this is going to be this is going to be the best thing ever. We're going to be on top of it. And you're talking pennies. You know what I mean? And we were talking the other day saying we should get that printed and put it in the office, because that's all we had. So we just went, right, let's just try and master that. And then when we mastered that, we did it again and did it more and did it bigger and did it better. And that's it. But if we'd have never wrote that down, if we'd never started on the journey, we wouldn't be here. You know what I mean? I think, like you said, it's debilitating. People they wait for all the answers. They want to know the route. Me, I'm a big fan of getting in the car and just not knowing where I'm going. You know what I mean? Just drive to see what happens.
Good advice. So I have got a blind question for you from
I saw this on the notes,
called Mike Mayer. And this is an interesting question. Don't look so worried. What's stopping you investing in your people?
Really, honestly, time and priorities, which is horrendous to say, but that's the honest answer. I think sometimes, if you're a business owner, or you're any sort of like team leader or whatever, there's so much stuff that needs your attention, isn't there? You know what I mean? You got to do this, you got to do that. You've got to do your own workload. You've got to look after everybody else's workload. You've got to look after your own mental health. You got to make sure everybody else is okay. And then you got to do, if you're in business, then you got to do your taxes and your receipts and your end of years. And there's just so many fires that you constantly have to put out. There's so many things vying for your attention that I think sometimes you can wrongly prioritize those things. I've always found that, like, if you invest into people, the return on that is incalculable.
Mm.
But oftentimes we put it down the list because we look at things and we say, well, you're paid to do that job, so you should do that job regardless. And that is true, but we're all humans, aren't we? So we all need reinvesting into, we all need G'ing up, we all need looking after and looking out for. And I think as business owners or business leaders, any leaders, in fact, any leaders, doesn't matter if you're leading a team, doesn't matter if you're leading your family, it doesn't matter. There's what we think is important sometimes is often not important. And when you do that, I think that prevents you from investing in people. Like, people are your biggest asset. People.
Yeah. And I think
you've got to invest in them.
When I ask people to write down a list of what they spend their time doing, so whether you're a parent or a leader or whatever, and it's all the tangible stuff, and actually what counts is investing in the people, the relationships, listening, feedback, and all the rest of it. That's the stuff that is less easy to measure. So you could spend an hour having a conversation with someone, and at the end of it, you still go, oh my gosh, I've still got my list of stuff to get through. Yeah. Or someone might say, what have you achieved this morning? And it's like, oh, I had a conversation with someone for an hour. Is that all? But actually that conversation, as you say, the value of that, you can't you can't put value on, because it's that sense of, you don't know the difference that's made. That could be huge. And that's the bit that always gets pushed out.
Yeah. The guy who runs all of our teams now, I met him when we were really young, and I showed him and taught him how to basically take photos. That was the thing. And now, that investment years ago, there was no return for me. It was just, he was my friend and he wanted to know, and he knew a little bit already, and I wanted to help him, by telling him what I knew and stuff like that. And now fast forward, 15 years later, he's now runs all of our teams. You could never have foreseen that happening. You could never have seen that coming. And that loyalty and friendship and trust and all of those really important things that you've got to have in a business anyway are so much stronger now, because I've always invested in people. I haven't always got it right, of course. More often than not, I prioritize things in the wrong order. But when you look at stuff, the best things that have ever happened to me, it is because I've invested in people first. You know what I mean? And if you give out of yourself, I always find that Christmas is coming up. I'm not a big gift person. I don't really want a lot of stuff. I'd never, last year I said to my wife, don't get me anything. I'm not really bothered, but I'm a big fan of giving gifts, and it's the same in investing in people, isn't it? It does something inside of you that you can't really give language to. You can't help another person and never feel bad about it. You just can't. It does something so good inside of your own head. And I always find that, if you're having a bad day, just go and help someone, because you'll feel much better. Don't try and help yourself. Just try and help somebody else and you'll feel better.
I love that. I put a post on LinkedIn a couple of days ago about holding someone's hand and just holding people's hands, just being there for them. And it's not only for them, it's for you as well. Courtney, I have love today. Considering when we started this, before we hit record, you're like, oh my gosh, we're having this conversation. I'm not sure what it's going to be like. And I was like, it's just a chat.
I thought you were going to show me pictures where it's the answer's meant to be a butterfly, but then I say skull or something, and then you're like, I thought it was in the films where they
No,
that's
no. Your energy is infectious.
Thank you.
What you share in terms of your wisdom from your own experience is so powerful. And you can have, people like me talking about stuff from a psychological perspective, but actually to hear the way you put really important concepts into plain language and tell it through story, and things like your pH and soil and building a plane in the air and all that stuff. I just think people will connect with that, and I think everyone who listens to this will take something away from it. So thank you so much for joining me.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been good fun, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah,
we'll do another one at some point.
That's what it's all about. Just make sure you're having good fun. Make sure you're having a laugh. Everyone else will work out.
Thanks, Courtney.
No worries.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. I invite you to think about one thing that you will take away to think about or do differently. I'd be really grateful if you can give me a thumbs up on Apple or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and for an extra brownie point, leave me a short review. I'm really keen to help drive real change for better practice in the world of people at work, and spreading the message will help that. I'd love you to also join the club to stay in the loop and be the first to hear about exciting things that I'm developing, including free downloadable resources. Please do reach out to me directly to discuss the topics covered on this podcast, or perhaps other challenges around people at work. And if we're not already acquainted on LinkedIn, please connect. All the links you need are in the show notes. So until next time, bye for now.